The rain fell so hard that night that Ella could barely see her father's face. He knelt down in front of her, held her small hands, and told her to stay right there and wait. She was only 6 years old, and she believed him. She waited for hours outside a crumbling apartment building, watching every car that passed, hoping one of them would stop and be him. None of them did. Daniel Grant had made his choice, and that choice was to disappear into the night, leaving his daughter behind on a street she did not recognize. He owed money to people who did not forgive debts, and he believed that vanishing was the only way to keep her safe from men who collected what they were owed in ways that had nothing to do with kindness. He told himself it was an act of love. To Ella, it felt like the end of everything she knew. A woman named Grace Miller found her near midnight, soaked and shaking under a store awning. Grace was on her way home from her job, cleaning offices late into the night for a company that owned half the buildings downtown, though few people ever saw the men who truly ran it. She could have walked past. Instead, she crouched down, wrapped her coat around the girl, and asked her name. Ella could barely speak. Grace took her home that night, fed her warm soup, and made a decision that would shape both of their lives forever. She did not know yet that the company she cleaned for belonged to 3 men, whose names people whispered rather than spoke aloud. Days turned into weeks, and no one came looking for Ella. Grace tried to find any trace of her father, asking around the neighborhood, checking with people who might have known him, but every road led nowhere. Eventually, she stopped searching and started raising the girl as her own. She never had much money, but she gave Ella something steadier than comfort. She gave her routine, warmth, and the sense that she mattered to someone. Ella grew up quiet and watchful, the kind of child who noticed everything and said very little. She learned to read people quickly, a skill she would need far sooner than anyone expected. The offices Grace cleaned each night belonged to a family that controlled much of the city from behind closed doors. 3 men sat at the top of it, each one careful, each one feared, though none of them ever raised their voice in public. Ella would sometimes wait for Grace after school, sitting quietly in a corner of the building, watching men in dark suits walk past without a glance in her direction. She was invisible to them, a small shadow in a place built on secrets. She had no idea that the very people her father had once run from would one day change the entire course of her life. For now, she was simply a girl in a chair, waiting for the woman who had saved her, unaware that the city's most powerful men were about to notice her at last. The night everything changed began like any other. Ella was 17, sitting in her usual corner while Grace worked late, when the quiet of the building shattered without warning. Voices rose sharply from the floor above, followed by fast, urgent footsteps. She had learned long ago to stay still in moments like this, to fold herself into the shadows and wait until the danger passed. But something told her this time was different. She heard a door burst open down the hall, and before she could think, a man came stumbling toward her, clutching his side, his face pale with pain. She recognized him instantly. He was one of the 3 men who ran the company, a man everyone in the building treated with quiet fear. His name was Nathan Wolfe, and in that moment he looked nothing like the powerful figure people whispered about. He looked like someone who needed help immediately or would not survive the night. Ella did not stop to consider the danger to herself. She pulled him into a nearby supply closet, pressed a folded cloth against his side to slow the bleeding, and stayed calm even as shouting echoed through the hallway outside. She had spent years learning how to disappear, and now she used that same instinct to keep both of them hidden and silent until the chaos passed. When the building finally fell quiet, she helped him to a chair and called for someone she trusted, one of the drivers who often waited outside for Grace. Within the hour, 2 more men arrived, their faces tight with worry that melted into confusion the moment they saw Nathan alive and steady, sitting beside a teenage girl they had never noticed before. These were the other 2 men who shared control of the company, Adam Cross and Ryan Bell. They asked her name. She answered simply, without fear, without the nervous stammer most people had around them. They asked how she had known what to do. She told them the truth, that she had simply stayed calm and done what needed doing. The three men exchanged a long look, one that carried years of unspoken understanding between them. They were not men who trusted easily, and they were certainly not men who forgot a debt. Whatever Ella had done that night, it would not go unanswered. Rather than send her away with a reward and a warning to forget what she had seen, they made an unusual decision. They wanted her close. They wanted to understand whether her composure under pressure was a rare gift or simply a lucky accident born of fear. Grace was hesitant when they approached her about it, protective of the girl she had raised as her own daughter. But the offer they made was not one easily refused, and Ella herself seemed unshaken by the idea of stepping closer to their world rather than further from it. She had spent her whole life on the outside looking in, invisible to the people who held real power. For the first time, someone had truly seen her. As she walked out of the building that night beside Grace, she did not yet know that this single moment of instinct would open a door that could never again be closed. In the weeks that followed, Ella found herself spending more time in the company's offices, though never quite as an employee and never quite as a guest. Adam Cross began giving her small tasks at first, simple errands that tested her reliability more than her skill. She completed each one without complaint, arriving early, staying late, and asking sharp questions that revealed she paid attention to details most people overlooked entirely. Ryan Bell noticed this quickly and began involving her in longer conversations, testing her memory and her judgment by asking her to recall details from meetings she had only briefly witnessed. She surprised him every time. Nathan Wolfe kept a careful distance at first, still recovering and still cautious about trusting anyone too quickly, even the young woman who had helped him through his worst night. But slowly, he began to seek her opinion on small matters, curious whether her calm nature extended to judgment as well as composure. It did. Ella had a way of looking at problems from angles the three men had grown too used to ignoring. She asked questions no one else dared to ask, and more often than not, those questions uncovered something worth knowing. It was during a routine review of shipping records that Ella noticed something odd, a pattern of numbers that did not add up the way they should have. She brought it to Ryan quietly, without making a scene, simply laying out what she had found and letting him draw his own conclusions. What she had uncovered was a trusted employee quietly feeding information to a rival organization, someone none of the three men had ever suspected. The discovery sent a ripple of unease through the company, not because of what it revealed, but because of who had revealed it. A girl barely out of her teenage years had seen what a dozen experienced men had missed entirely. The three bosses did not agree on what to do with this new information about her value. Adam saw potential, someone worth shaping into a trusted advisor. Ryan saw danger, a variable too unpredictable to leave unchecked, someone who might one day know too much for her own safety or theirs. Nathan, quieter than the other two, found himself thinking of her differently altogether, though he kept those thoughts carefully to himself. Their disagreement simmered beneath the surface, unspoken, but present in every room the three of them shared. Meanwhile, Ella remained unaware of the full weight of the attention she had drawn. She only knew that for the first time in her life, she had a purpose beyond simply surviving each day. Grace watched all of this unfold with growing worry, sensing that the girl she had raised was being pulled into a world with rules far more complicated than anything she could protect her from. Ella reassured her gently, insisting she could handle whatever came next. That reassurance was tested sooner than anyone expected. Word arrived one evening that a rival organization, aware of the shifting dynamics within the company, was preparing to test their unity. The news spread through the offices like a held breath, and for the first time, Ella understood that her place among these three powerful men was no longer a quiet arrangement. It was about to become something far more dangerous and far more real than she had ever imagined. The warning came late in the evening, delivered by a nervous associate who insisted the three bosses gather immediately. Ella was asked to leave the room, but she refused quietly, arguing that she had already proven her judgment was worth trusting. After a tense pause, Adam allowed her to stay, and what she heard confirmed the danger everyone had feared. A rival organization believed the company was divided at its core, and they intended to use that division to their advantage before the three men could unite against them. For the next several days, Ella found herself thrown into decisions far beyond anything she had faced before. She helped track unusual movements reported by drivers and associates across the city, cross-referencing them against patterns she had learned from months of quiet observation. Her contributions were small individually but powerful together, forming a clearer picture of the threat closing in. The three bosses, despite their disagreements about her role, found themselves relying on her insight more with each passing day. It was during this tense period that Ella made a discovery far more personal than anything related to the rival threat. Searching through old records to understand the company's history, she came across a name she recognized instantly, her father's name, tied to an old debt that had never been settled. The realization struck her hard. She had always believed her father abandoned her out of weakness or cowardice, but the documents told a different story. He had owed money to men connected to this very organization, and rather than let his daughter become a bargaining chip in that conflict, he had chosen to disappear, believing it was the only way to keep her out of danger. The revelation left her shaken in a way the looming rival threat had not. She had spent years believing she was simply left behind, unwanted and forgotten. Now she understood her father's disappearance had been an act of desperate protection, however flawed and however painful its result had been. She did not know whether to feel anger, grief, or a strange, aching gratitude. She chose, for now, to say nothing to the three men who had unknowingly become the center of both her past and her future. Her silence did not last long. As the threat from the rival organization grew closer, tensions inside the company reached a breaking point. Ryan pushed for a cautious retreat, wanting to protect what they had built without unnecessary risk. Adam argued for a bold response, unwilling to appear weak in the face of a challenge. Nathan, still uncertain about his own feelings toward Ella, found himself torn between loyalty to his old friends and a growing instinct to protect the young woman who had once saved his life. Their disagreement threatened to fracture the very unity the rival organization was counting on. Ella watched this unfold with a clarity that surprised even herself. She understood, perhaps better than any of them, what division could cost. She had lived her entire life as a consequence of one man's fractured decision, and she refused to watch history repeat itself in front of her. When the moment came for the three bosses to finally decide how to respond to the threat, it was Ella who stepped forward, calm and steady, and offered a plan that considered all three of their concerns at once. For the first time, all three men listened to her not as an outsider, but as someone whose judgment they trusted completely. The plan worked exactly as Ella had hoped, calming the rising tension between the rival organization and the company without any of the reckless escalation Adam had feared or the passive retreat Ryan had wanted to avoid. In the days that followed, something shifted permanently within the group. The three bosses, once divided in their opinion of her, now spoke of her with a quiet, shared respect. She was no longer simply a girl they had chosen to keep close. She had become someone whose voice carried real weight in every decision that mattered. Grace noticed the change immediately when Ella came home each evening, standing a little taller, speaking with a confidence that had not been there before. She was proud, though still quietly worried about the world her daughter had stepped into. Ella reassured her again, this time with a certainty that felt earned rather than simply hopeful. She had faced the truth about her father, survived a threat that could have unraveled everything, and found her footing among men who once would not have given her a second glance. Nathan finally spoke to her privately about the discovery she had made regarding her father, having learned of it through records the company kept from that era. He did not offer sympathy she did not need, only understanding, and a quiet acknowledgement that circumstances beyond anyone's control often shaped lives far more than the choices made within them. Ella found unexpected comfort in his honesty, and the distance between them began to close in a way neither of them commented on directly. Adam, meanwhile, began formally training her in the finer details of running the company's operations, recognizing that her instincts, once sharpened further, could make her an invaluable part of its future, rather than simply a clever bystander. Ryan, once the most hesitant about her presence, became her fiercest advocate, defending her judgment in meetings where others still doubted a young woman could hold such influence. The three men who had once disagreed about what to do with her now found themselves united by the very person they had almost sent away. Ella never forgot the little girl left standing in the rain, waiting for a father who never returned. That memory did not disappear, but it no longer defined her. She had transformed her abandonment into a foundation for something far stronger, a place among people who valued her not out of pity or obligation, but because she had earned every bit of the trust she now held. She thought of her father sometimes, wondering if he ever imagined the life she had built from the ruins of the one he left behind. In the end, it was not the three powerful men who had rewritten her fate, though their influence had opened the door. It was Ella herself who had walked through it, choosing courage over fear again and again, until the story people once whispered about a forgotten little girl became something entirely different. She stood now, not as someone's shadow or someone's charity, but as an equal among the very people who ran the city from behind closed doors. Her father had left her behind on a rainy street with nothing. What she built from that nothing became everything.